Welcome to the Alcohol Tipping Point podcast. I'm your host, Deb Maisner. I'm a registered nurse, health coach, and alcohol-free badass. I have found that there's more than one way to address drinking. If you've ever asked yourself if drinking is taking more than it's giving, or if you've found that you're drinking more than usual, you may have reached your own alcohol tipping point. The Alcohol Tipping Point is a podcast for you to find tips, tools, and thoughts to change your drinking. Whether you're ready to quit forever or a week, this is the place for you. You are not stuck and you can change. Let's get started. Welcome back, everybody. On the show today is Danni Carr. She is the host of the popular How I Quit Alcohol podcast. Danni's journey to alcohol freedom started in 2017 with her much-loved Australian blues musician husband, Ash Grunwald. They did a 12-month alcohol-free challenge together that has turned into just a continued life of awesome sobriety. I think that's so cool. I'm excited to hear your story. Danni is a trauma-informed sobriety coach and breathwork and meditation teacher who uses Dr. Gabor Mate's compassionate inquiry approach to healing and coaching. And her and Ash have a new book coming out. It's called How I Quit Alcohol, a rock and roll guide to sobriety and living well. So welcome.
Hi, Deb. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank you for
Makes me
coming
laugh at
on.
in true. Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, and I just wanted to share with you how I first heard about you. I don't know why this is gonna make me a little emotional, but
Mm.
so my brother, he's been alcohol free now 3 years, but so I got sober first in 2020, and then he started his journey in 2021, and he was always just so supportive of me and my podcast. However, he's like, "I really love this podcast from Australia.
Oh,
It's How I Quit Alcohol, and I love the woman on it." And he just had so much admiration for you, and so I just wanna say thank you because I feel like you played a big part in my brother giving up alcohol, and
oh,
thank you for all you do, and I don't know why I got so emotional about that,
oh,
but
yeah.
it's really special to have you here. I texted him today. I was like, "I'm gonna have Danni on the show," and he's like, "Oh my gosh, tell her I wish her well," and he was
Oh,
excited,
wow.
and he's like, "She's like a
Oh,
celebrity for me," and I
oh,
just thought it was so sweet, so I wanted to
oh, so
share
good.
that with you.
Oh, thanks, Deb. That's really beautiful. It's beautiful to hear that. And yeah, and I could just, oh, yeah, that I could see it means a lot to you too. And that's, yeah, it's great, isn't it? Great that there's lots of different options for people to listen and some things will hit, the right spot for some people. And yeah, that's great. And I'm glad that I was able to help, or it was of use to your brother anyway. That's awesome to hear. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so
Mm,
much. So, I think it's your story and your story of how you quit drinking with your husband, and so it's
mhm,
lovely just to have your husband's story part of it, and you do some of your podcasts, quite a few together, and wrote this book
mhm,
together. So,
mhm.
can you just share for people who are familiar with you just a little bit about your background,
Mhm.
who you are, where you're from, and then what your experience was. Your guys' big story of
Oh
taking that
my gosh.
year-long break. I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah, okay. Well, I grew up in the country in Australia and met my husband Ash. Gee, we were 24 when we met and both playing a lot of music at the time and just really immersed in that culture of the music, playing gigs and a lot of drinking. And so when we met and got together, and I actually think that I influenced him a bit with his drinking to ramp it up a notch. That when we met, he was really only drinking at gigs because he thought that was the bluesy thing to do because he's a blues musician. And we, got together and were just drinking, drinking, drinking. And I'd come, as I said, from the country. And the culture that I grew up in was one of like binge drinking on the weekends. And we'll probably get into this, but in hindsight, realized I was probably a pretty shy person and drank a lot for confidence. It gave me confidence. And so I kind of needed that confidence on weekends or to feel like I fitted in. And so I didn't even question my relationship with alcohol really, that I just drank and drank and drank and drank and drank on weekends, and then we'd have periods of time off and then not. And then, yeah, I guess as Ash and I spent more time together, that's just how that evolved. And then getting deeper into the music industry, Ash's career started to really take off a few years into our relationship together. And I guess the more well-known you become, the more your rider, do you know what the rider is? What you the free drinks or the hospitality that you're given at
Okay,
shows.
like your
Um
request, like red M&Ms?
yeah, that kind of thing. So with that would get as you get more well known, that rider increases to pretty much whatever you want. And so any amount of alcohol that you're after, and you just take advantage of that. You're like, wow, free booze, amazing. So you just start drinking all that. And, it just kind of progressed. And I'm not blaming the music industry, but it was what was expected. And it's okay to turn up and be drunk at your work, at your job, and, and then certainly probably sitting on the sidelines there, there's me at the back just drinking away, drinking that rider of ashes, and I certainly got in trouble many times that he'd get off stage and there'd be none left. And so, yeah, and look, and fast forward many years and just hanging out with people in that same industry on weekends when we weren't playing shows or there wasn't shows on, that's just what we'd all do together. We'd all hang out and drink and, yeah, and so eventually, we had kids and it was I mean, there's a whole long story. I won't go into the whole thing, but, having the kids and then Nash being away on tour and then me being home with the kids and not being on tour, I would end up drinking and then it would just got really debauched, and not all the time. Certainly, I wasn't a daily drinker, but yeah, it just got, yeah, pretty out of control at times where just waking up with lots of shame and remorse, never drinking again. Come Thursday, fuck it. Oh, sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this one.
Oh, you
Stuff
can.
it, do it again, rinse, repeat, same cycle, same cycle, same cycle. And that waking up with all the shame and remorse all the time was just becoming the regular. And kind of realizing, I noticed that I keep saying I don't wanna do it again, but I keep end up doing it again. So I'd tried to moderate and just trying all the things. And then eventually, my best friend said to me, "I'm gonna take a year off alcohol." And I was like, "Oh my god, you are?" Because also the fact that she was doing it gives me permission to do it. So I was like, "I think I'm gonna do it too." And so I said to Ash, my husband, "Hey, Lisa's giving up booze for a year. I'm gonna do it too." It seems really extreme, but by that point too, I'd done a month here or 2 months there. So it was just like, "Okay, this is big, but I want it," and I kind of wanted that permission to do it. So then he was like, "Okay, I'll do it too then." I wasn't really expecting him to, but yeah, so he said yes. And then some other friends of ours, other musicians, were like, "You know what? We're gonna do it too." So there was a group of us, not everyone hung in there till the end, but there was 4 core people from that group that stuck with it till the end, till the 12 months. And then that was it. It was like, got to the end of 12 months. I mean, there's a whole big story in that 12 months. I'm not sure how much you wanna go into, but I got to the end of that 12 months and felt so changed, like I'd done a lot of work on myself in that 12 months, and I realized how much I didn't hate myself. I realized I wasn't waking up hating myself on the weekends. That was the driving factor too. Every time I wanted to drink, I just kept thinking, "Oh, I just don't wanna hate myself. I know if I do, I kind of know now I can't just have one, and I promised my friends I'm doing this for the 12 months." And I just started to realize, wow, I feel in a much better place in my relationship with myself at the end of the 12 months. So I just said to Ash really scared kind of thing, like, because I remember right up until 2 weeks before, I kept thinking, at the end of the 12 months, I'm gonna drink again. I'm gonna buy this bottle of red and that bottle of tequila, and I'm gonna get really, like, messed up. But then at about 2 weeks before, I felt really scared of that. I was actually really scared to go back. I said to Ash, I can't go back. I don't wanna go back. I don't know about you, but I can't." And he was just like, "Yeah, me either." And then a couple of our friends were like, "Us too." So it was awesome, and then just kept going. The podcast and all that came later, but yeah, it's certainly at that point, it was never about, creating a podcast or a book or doing any coaching. It was very much just about, "This is what I need and this is what I want." And then here we are. Did
I
that
I
answer your
I
question? I don't know if I just went on a rant there or not.
No, I think it's so interesting, and you have a
Mm,
unique story that well, I mean, it's unique having this musician and the rock style lifestyle and all of
mhm,
that is
mm.
unique, but just the fact that you both did it together and then you both kept going, and then
Yeah,
some of your friends did too, and
yeah,
I just think that's so great,
yeah.
and I appreciate you saying, like, you did do some of the breaks before, because 1 year does sound very daunting,
Mhm,
and I'm curious if you would still recommend that now or how you feel about it now when people are, like, changing their drinking or they're not sure, like, they're
mm.
taking a break.
Yeah, well, I would recommend it because it worked for me, but it's not for everyone. Like, some people want to just try a month off here or there, and that's good too. Like, I've got plenty of friends and people in my own family who are like, "I'm just gonna take a year off. I don't want to take I'm just gonna take a month off. I don't want to take a year off just to see where I'm at." And I think you've got to meet yourself where you're at, like, one thing I do know is this, Deb, giving yourself a hard time in any way or setting yourself up to fail isn't helpful either. And giving yourself a hard time about not reaching goals is not helpful either. So if it means that you have to start small, start small. You've got to start, yeah, you've got to be really honest and just go, what's possible for me right now? And I was really ready. Like, I'd woken up so many times, like not remembering putting my kids to bed, and not remembering if I'd fed them, letting people down, letting my kids down enough times that I was and just hating on myself enough. I just wanted a break from it, and I just thought, "Give me a year. Yes, fucking please." Like, a year without having that sounds great. Of course, it wasn't so easy, but yeah, I just think it's important to just meet yourself where you're at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. I mean, any break is a gift, right? But I kind of remember was your husband talking about for him it was almost easier to have that bigger timeline than a shorter timeline?
Yeah. Yeah, so for him, he just thought, "Okay, it's just off the like, it's out of the question," and he adopted a different his was an attitude of, "It's easy, just decide it's easy, and it's gonna be easy for that year," that was his way of seeing it. He was a big drinker, like a very big drinker. It wasn't easy per se, but he decided to have that mindset. Well, he's really into changing your mindset. He's really down that rabbit hole. So, yeah, definitely for him, it was like, if I just and I think it's true too, to take the whole year out and knowing it's off the cards, like it's off the table for a whole year, in a way it's a bit easier than kind of thinking, because I know with myself, when I'd have a month off, I would get so wasted at the end of that month. I'd call it much as you like day at the end. So I'd abstain from all sorts of things, no wheat, no sugar, no dairy, no alcohol. And then I'd have much as you like day at the end of it. It was probably so unhealthy. You'd eat twisties and eat all the bad food and drink all the drinks and just get wasted for a day or two and then have to recover from that. But yeah, so yeah, I think definitely giving yourself a whole year does give you a lot of space and a lot of time to really figure it out. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I could see because the decision has been made.
yeah,
And
yeah.
because it's that in between, that's where moderation for me, where I was like, "I can't do this anymore. This sucks. I'd rather have none
Mhm.
than one." 'Cause,
True.
trying
Yes.
to have 1 or 2 also, what is the point of that? It was
Yeah.
exhausting. So when I
Yes.
could get to the point where I'm like, "Okay, I'm having none," that was easier than
Mhm.
trying to figure out my rules.
100%, I agree, and Ash would say the same thing too, that it was just easier to have none than to try and moderate. Moderating is a head fuck, like, moderating is so hard, and I've tried every form of moderation, as I'm sure you have too, Deb, like, 1 every hour, I remember watching the clock, or 2 drinks of water in between each not until this time, everything. I've tried everything, no wine, only vodka, mixed with that much vodka, that much water, like, everything, and it just didn't work, and some days it would work, and then other days, I would just blow out and then suddenly wake up the next day like, "What the hell happened?" what happened to my moderation? I can't remember going to bed, let alone what I did last night.
Yeah.
Oh my god,
Yeah.
it's so hard.
And then it's
Mm,
just perpetuating, like, those negative stories and beliefs that you
yeah.
have. Because one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was how you use compassionate inquiry.
Mhm.
And because it's something that you got trained in and became passionate about,
Mm.
do you wanna go down that rabbit hole a little bit?
Sure, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
certainly compassionate inquiry wasn't something that I used on myself early on. Definitely much so once I'd learned it and did the course in it and everything like that. So I did a 1-year compassionate inquiry for professionals with Dr. Gabor Mate, who's brilliant and a little controversial, but I found his approach and that approach of compassionate inquiry such a beautiful one. And it's where you basically, how would I describe it? It's where you kind of get to your core wounds quite quickly through a series of the stepping stones, they call it, of questioning the feeling sensations in the body, identifying the story that you tell yourself and the core emotion, and then how far back that goes. Because usually we will be triggered by something in the moment, might be someone turning up late or someone not inviting you to a party perhaps, or something that invokes a bit of an emotional response from you that's bigger than perhaps it should be. And so I'll give you an example. Say if Ash leaves his towels on the floor after surfing and having a shower, and he might leave his towels all over the floor. And then I might get triggered and get really upset by that. And I start to tell myself it's because he doesn't fucking love me that he's leaving towels on the floor. You know, it takes a bit of inquiry to get to that. And then to kind of, okay, what's the story I'm telling myself? He doesn't love me. And what's his story? He doesn't love me. Or if he doesn't love me, that makes me unlovable. And where does this story come from? I'm not lovable. And then to trace that right back, I'm trying to, you know, condense this down into a very quick conversation here. Is that a familiar story? Is that something I've told myself for a long time? How far back does that go? And then if I was to trace that right back into my childhood, my mum was an addict and also came from a split family where I didn't quite feel like I fitted in because I was the only child of my mum and dad. So going pretty deep now. And also there's this sense of I never knew what I was going to get. I really wanted my mum not to perhaps take pills on a certain day and get wasted or be not available to me. And in my little child brain, I would see that as perhaps not consciously, but subconsciously, if she really loved me, she wouldn't do that. Or, and if I was more lovable, I'd fit in better with these siblings who I was probably a real pain in the ass. But being this young girl, but I had created these beliefs and core beliefs about myself that I wasn't lovable. And so to feel not lovable as a kid is pretty unbearable. And so you start to adapt coping mechanisms around that. And then, fast forward 10, 15 years, you drink alcohol, suddenly you fit in. That tension's taken away from me. And okay, so what I had to learn to do was this is years later of not drinking, learn to, when that thing comes up, when Ash leaves the towels on the floor, to sit for a moment and go trace it back. And then there's a part of me that feels unlovable and finding that part of me that feels unlovable and being with that part and telling that part what it needs to hear. And yeah, so I find that I use that in my coaching with people a lot, trying to get to the core wounding and trying to be with that part and give that part what it needs. Yeah, is really helpful. And it's definitely helped me on my quest of expansion, I suppose. Does that answer the question? I don't know if I explained that very well or
Oh,
very
definitely.
succinctly. Yeah. Um, so when we can recognize our core wounds, and it's not about trauma fishing either, it's about kind of locating, going back, finding the core wounds, giving that part what it needs, and then hopefully we're not so reactive anymore. So I guess we then are more liberated from that, from identifying those core wounds. There's liberation in that. We're like, oh, that's why I'm like that. That's why I act like that. Oh, that's why alcohol feels so good when it hits my system. Okay, and then you start to understand why we use it in the first place. And it's really important too to identify why we use it, what's good about it, so that we can give ourselves that in a different way. And so compassion inquiry is a beautiful process where we start to really very gently trace things back and give ourselves what we need in a different way. So yeah, I hope I explained that well. But certainly just checking out Gabor Mate too and his amazing work. He's got a book on addiction called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. Brilliant book. And also The Myth of Normal, where he dives into a bit of that stuff as well, and it's really interesting. It's not the only way I work, but it's certainly a large component of how I work. But that came years later, years and years later, and lots of study and other things later. But I find it works really well. It's a really effective method to just get to sometimes it can take years of therapy to get to that core wound. It's pretty, you can drill down on it pretty quickly, and it's really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, it is really beautiful because I see a lot of people, once they remove the alcohol, then it's kind
Mhm.
of like, okay, what's happening here? And a reparenting of yourself in
Mm.
a way, and you're finding other ways to self-soothe,
Yeah.
and like I lead with compassion too
Mm.
so much, and
Mhm.
having that compassion for yourself. So I love, the name Compassionate Inquiry,
Mm.
and I feel like there are kind of these common. I'm curious, like, if you found, like, what some of those common beliefs are. Some of that "I'm not enoughness," "I'm not worthy," "I
Mm.
don't belong," like, when you're really getting into these beliefs. Is there anything that you've found, especially related to people who are struggling with drinking?
Look, it seems to be one of the very common one is I'm not good enough, I'm not enough. That seems to definitely come up a lot with people in this space in the alcohol space anyway. Not lovable. I'm not lovable, not worthy. They're definitely the top 3 that show up. Of course, there's different ones, but they seem to be the most common ones for sure, which is really sad. You feel like, when someone hits on that and they realize and they have that light bulb moment of, wow, I've always felt I wasn't enough. Or, wow, I've always felt like I wasn't lovable. No wonder I drink. No wonder I've drunk my way through certain situations or social situations. And they view themselves through that lens of compassion or it's such a beautiful moment where it's like, you see the shoulders drop and not that that changes everything, Deb, either. There's a lot of work that then goes into it then, to kind of constantly notice when that part of us is triggered and it's constantly going back to that. I studied that course for 1 year and time after time, week after week after week, we did these triads and dyads where we'd get together and practice on each other within the group. And every week I'd say, now I'm not going to go back to that thing about mum or my siblings. Definitely not. No, this is something completely different. And every time Deb would go straight back to that. It was unbelievable. Like it wouldn't matter what the thing was that was triggering me. It would seem to always go back to that same thing. And look, 1 year of constantly going, it kind of got boring in the end too. Just like, okay, yeah, I know what it's going to be. I know what it's going to be. And people within the course, we understood each other's triggers then too, because we've been working on it with each other for so long. And they'd do the same thing, like, oh God, yeah, there it is again. And so it was a really pretty amazing process too to do that course and to come out of just time after time, keep going and to keep going back to that. It was really enlightening. I was like, wow, it's true. This is what's shaped me and it causes all of my big outbursts. So not just my craving for alcohol, but my, like, rage outbursts that would happen or my big explosive reactions that might happen when my 16-year-old daughter would trigger me in a way, so it was always going back to those same themes. It was really interesting. And still does, by the way. Like, I'm not perfect. I still have outbursts and rages occasionally, nowhere near as like I used to, but they still show up. I'm still working on them all the time. But I find that, oh, I know what it is. Yeah, I know what that is. So, yeah, does that make sense? Am I making
Yeah,
sense?
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
it's so true, like, there is a relief when people figure out themselves a little bit more, make sense of what's happening,
Mm,
like, "Oh, of course. Oh, that makes sense." Like you said, like, that sigh of relief, and
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, I
I
feel it
just
in myself when I've acted like a dick, like 2 weeks ago, where I've had an and I've sat there, I'm like, "Oh, that's why," and then I have to go apologize to my daughter and say, "I'm really sorry," and, it is lucky that we can in this household, we can speak in that way that's like, "I'm really sorry that I did that, and I spoke to you that way, and I reacted that way." But I'm able to give myself some compassion first, and then by giving myself that compassion, I'm able to be really honest and go to her and say sorry and really mean it and to understand where it came from. So I don't give myself a hard time for being a shit mum or, it's beautiful. So yes, definitely with people that you work with, but within ourselves where we're able to have compassion for ourselves and to keep showing up with compassion all the time. And I think we can have real growth then when we're not like self-flagellating all the time like I did for years and years and years. Yeah.
Oh, me too. And I always tell
Mhm.
people, like, look, if it worked to beat yourself up and shame yourself and, hate
Mhm.
yourself,
Yeah.
you you wouldn't need to be listening to this podcast or need help or anything, right? If that worked. And
Right.
because it's
Yeah.
so counterintuitive. And we just think
Mm.
like, how I don't deserve it. I don't deserve to be kind and compassionate to myself.
Yeah.
Maybe that would make me weak. Maybe, there's just so many beliefs there. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
what are some other like practices, either related to compassionate inquiry or whatnot, but other kind of practices to pull into people who are changing their drinking? Other things
Yeah.
that you recommend that come to mind? Because you've been doing this a long time now, since
Yeah.
2017. Oh, but then you started your podcast.
Yes. Yeah. So I started the podcast and then I started coaching probably a year after the podcast was out. And I didn't know either when I started the podcast I was going to be doing coaching. That all just like I did a playbook, which was like a guided journal using all the tools that we had used in that first year. And I've definitely changed my coaching style over time too, because at first it was very much about changing mindset, which I still do. But also now it's like changing mindset meets this really compassionate way of showing up with yourself also and really giving yourself all those parts that are triggered what they need. So as I've sort of grown and done my own work on myself, I've been able to sort of change the way I work a bit. But what was the question again? Sorry, I've gone off track.
Well, that's okay, 'cause
Oh,
I'm just
what else do I
I like
use?
listening to how you've evolved too since,
Yeah.
you know, since you had a full 2 years alcohol free and then you started the podcast and then you started helping people and,
Yeah.
just how, like you said, you've evolved in how you've coached and whatnot. So now you've kinda accumulated all that into maybe part of this new book, How I Quit Alcohol. So, yeah,
Mm.
what are some of, I guess, an easier way to say would just be like some of your top tips, some things you find most helpful for people who are changing their drinking?
Yeah. So, meditation, honestly, 100% meditation and yoga. And when I say yoga, I don't mean the asanas, the poses, although that can be really helpful too. But meditation and breath work really to help kind of expand your resilience within your nervous system. I think if your nervous system is in good shape, you're going to make good choices. So it's all about grounding yourself so that you can create some pause to make better decisions. So I feel like if your nervous system is a bit like learning how to gauge where your nervous system is at is really, really important. So you can do that self check in and perhaps create some mindfulness to do the check in because that's the often thing that we miss as well. So by by starting a meditation practice, mindfulness practice is just so important. It has been for me. It's really changed my life and it's made me go from that reactive place to be able to take a pause, do the compassion inquiry perhaps, and see what it is that I'm needing. So I run workshops. I've been running some workshops with a beautiful woman called Ash Butters as well, who's another
I've
podcast host.
met her. We've been on each other's
Oh.
podcast. She's just a delight.
She's
Yeah.
gorgeous. She's gorgeous, and we've got some more of those coming up. Just really teaching people how to figure out where your nervous system's at and what you might need to give yourself. And I think that is really important to be able to take a pause before we react and go for the drink. But that comes with practice, and we don't always get it right. But I think if we start these practices of being able to tune into ourselves and find where we're at in any given moment and get to know ourselves, you start to have a conversation with yourself. So I think that's a really good start. And that's one thing that I think is really, really important, whether it's just learning to take a breath or learn a diaphragmatic as I said at the start, I'm a musician, singer, not a particularly good one either. But part of your singing training is diaphragmatic breathing. And so I'm lucky that I was always able to do that. And I think just by able to do that, we can reset our nervous system really quickly. And pretty quickly too, mind you. And I always say to people, doing say an extended exhale practice where you breathe into the diaphragm for 4 and breathe out for 8. Do that 4 times. That takes less than 3 minutes probably, depending on how fast you breathe. That's gonna work quicker than a scotch. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna work quicker than taking a glass of wine. You've got to wait for that to go through the whole system before you get the desired effect. So I think that's a really great place to start. Definitely some kind of mindfulness practice, even if it's just taking a breath, I think is super helpful. It can really help people. It's definitely helped me a lot. But I used to hate meditation. I just want to say that too. I hated it with a passion. Like I think I might have hated meditation more than anyone on this world or earth has ever hated meditation. I used to get angry in the yoga classes when it got to that. I'd be like, oh, what a waste of time this is. And I just honestly, I hated it so much. And now I love it so much. It's just taken years of chipping away and just trying different things, trying different ways of meditating. And, now I just love it. I have to do it every day. I love it so much. It's helped me so much. But it was my good friend, Lissy Turner. She's a yoga teacher here. And she said to me, God, what's going on with you? Like, 'cause I'd storm out of the class or storm out. I was on actually a yoga retreat with her. And I was just like, I just hate meditating. I go, it's just fucking aggravating. I hate it. She's like, well, babe, that means you need it.
I've heard yeah, isn't there that quote about, like, if a man says he has no time to meditate, it means he needs whatever,
Yes.
multiple hours
Yes.
to
Oh my God. But I can relate to anyone who says that I can't do it or I hate it or totally get it. I totally sympathize, and I think that, just starting incrementally, starting small, um, it's a really great place to start. If nothing else, just go and, do a meditation course or go down to a local yoga place that does restorative yoga or something that will help you reset your nervous system. I think it's a great thing to do.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your
Mhm,
experience and for sharing how you hated it because I think that is
mm,
really common. I hear that a lot
mhm,
too. Yeah, for
mhm,
sure.
mhm, mhm.
And then can you speak do you know more about uh having your exhale be longer than your inhale and why that is important?
Mhm. So it's it's scientifically proven as well that it induces the parasympathetic response. So we've got our fight or flight, our sympathetic nervous system response, or the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest. I could go all into polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve. I won't go too deeply into that because that's a whole probably another podcast episode. But what it does is it stimulates and also tones the vagus nerve, which controls a lot of the system. So it runs throughout the whole body and it runs out into the digestive tract, into the tummy. And so basically, if you breathe in and then extend your exhale, just think this: I am creating a parasympathetic response. I'm creating a rest and digest response just by extending my exhale. And that's all you kind of really need to know and do. Just breathing in for 4, out for 8, or in for 4, out for 6 will help get you out of that state of fight or flight and into that more relaxed state. If you can do it 4 times, or depending on where you're at, if you can just breathe into the and it's important to breathe into the belly too. So say you breathe in and expand the diaphragm. A good way of doing that too, if you don't know how to do it, we used to do this in singing lessons years ago. You'd lie and put a book on your belly and just see if you can see the book. So you could lay on your back and then put a book on your belly. And just what you want to do is you want to be able to see that book rise and fall. And it's a really easy way to do it. Or perhaps even putting your hands around the bottom of your rib cage there. And when you breathe in, you want your hands to sort of come apart. You want to feel them coming apart. When you breathe in, you don't want to be up into your shoulders. But so if you can start to direct your breath down, and it takes some time, and sometimes, particularly women, we're used to breathing in. I remember if someone said to me, "Take a deep breath in," I'd be like sucking my belly in. So you wanna go the opposite, and I always say, you wanna see big fat bellies. You wanna see that beautiful belly, big and like a big balloon. So if you breathe in for 4 and out for 6 really slowly through your nose, so it's important also to be going in and out through the nose. Actually, you can exhale through the mouth as well, but doing that for 6. So breathing in, we could even do it now together where if we so we to close the mouth off, I won't because 'cause I'm talking, but you can try it, Deb, too. So breathing in through the nose, hand on the belly. So put your hand on your belly and we'll breathe in for 4, 3, 2, 1, and hopefully you could feel that into your breathing into your hand that's on the belly. Exhale for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Beautiful. And inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And just notice the effects of that. Like, how did that make you feel, Deb, even just doing that super short practice?
I loved it already.
Mm.
I mean, and
Yeah.
that was only like 2 concentrated breaths, and
Yeah.
I just think our respiratory system is so amazing. It's like the only autonomic system that we have some control over. I always tell people
Mm.
like, "Yeah, go to your breath because
Go
it's
to your breath.
free."
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
accessible, like
Yeah.
you said, and it doesn't take long to affect the other parts of your body, affect your nervous system, bring that calm about, like, that's so lovely,
It's
and
just
it's just a
amazing.
good reminder. Yeah.
It's so quick. And if you're still feeling a bit agitated, do another couple of rounds. And it does work. It really does work. And if you can extend the exhale even more, so say you, and it's also gives your mind something to focus on. If you're a bit busy in the mind, if you concentrate on that counting and then, and slowing down that exhale more and more with each breath, suddenly you're not thinking about whatever it was you were thinking about anymore either. And that also helps to bring the nervous system back into a better place. So, yeah, I think working on the nervous system is really important. I think if you're going to quit alcohol, it's definitely right high up there on my list. Yeah, being able to check in, see where you're at, understand the nervous system. There's a great book called Anchored by Deb Dana. I would really highly recommend that for people. I don't know if you've recommended that to people before or if you've read it, but it's a great one where you it's and James Nestor's book Breath is also a great one as well. Yeah, really, really good. There's also something else I read recently. The Vagus Nerve Reset, I think it's called by Anna Freeman. I could have that wrong, but that was great. That was a really good book as well. So there's lots of great resources out there to learn this stuff and just learn what you can about your own body. Like, wow, there's so much out there and there's so much to learn. It's amazing.
I know, once you remove the alcohol, then you have all this time to read and learn new things and practice new things.
Yeah.
What
Mhm.
what would you say are some of your tips, like, for the early days for people? Because a lot of this, I think,
Mm.
comes later, right? And even you've
Yeah.
been on your own kinda self-growth discovery. Maybe what worked for you in the beginning is you're using something different now, just always growing and learning. But for people in the early days, what are some of your recommendations?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I'd say for the early days, really like for early on, like just trying to get through is a big one. And so figuring out what the alcohol does for you is really important. So I'll always say to people when I'm coaching them or if they're in my course, it's really important to figure out what it does for you. What's the alcohol giving you? What's right about it? Because if we don't know that, and that's something I got from Gabor as well. So that's not mine. But yeah, I find that really useful when working with people. So what does it do for me? And if we can figure that out, we're kind of going to know, okay, well, how can I give that to myself in a different way? So say it gives me stress relief or it gives me comfort. Okay, so let's go with comfort. It gives me comfort. Okay, so if it gives you comfort when you're stressed, perhaps, what's something else that you can do that would give you comfort? And for some people, it might be just getting into bed and wrapping up. Sometimes you just got to get to bed. That's the only safe place that you can get. If your mind's super busy and you wrap yourself up in your in your in your blankets and get all your pillows. Or going for a walk, something that will give you a bit of a dopamine hit, like a good brisk walk can help. a nice bath, giving yourself a reward at the end of the day that's not alcohol is super important. And if you're really stuck in like it's got me by the balls, I would say if you're really at that point where it's like, I'm about to go to the bottle shop, get into a cold shower. A cold shower will change your state quicker than anything. So just trying to figure out what it is. My dog's going a bit silly over there. Figuring out what it is that you need, what you want the alcohol, what you're hoping it will give you, trying to figure out how to do that instead. Also, just, you know, early on, like if you've got to go to a situation, it depends on what the alcohol's doing for you, right? But just say in my case, it was gave me confidence. I drank a lot in social situations. So just, and you probably talked about this before, I'm sure it's not reinventing the wheel here, but just going say if you're going to an event, you have to go, keep it short, only go for a short amount of time and get out of there really quickly and be armed with something like a good non-alcoholic drink, those kind of tips that everyone kind of knows about, but they're really helpful, they're really handy. But if you're really super stressed too, like, uh, I would say I just did a solo cast on it, replacing with something else. So rather than if you're typically drinking on a Friday night, maybe go out and do a restorative yoga class on a Friday night or go to an art class or do something, go to the movies to give yourself something else that's going to be really nourishing and really good for your nervous system that's not drinking. Also, playing it forward, just that one that everyone knows about, but it really works. Like that worked for me early days. Like just if I have this drink, be really honest with myself. What is it going to look like? If I and Deb, like you're saying, we can't moderate, right? So I know what's going to look like. It's probably going to be me getting wasted, can't remember going to bed, flashing my tits to the neighbors or my in-laws, or doing something fucking stupid. I've got to be honest with myself, It just, okay, so what's something else I could do, and play that forward. If I have a bath instead, play that tape forward. What's that gonna look like instead? And I just find those really simple tips that we all know about, but just put them into practice makes such a huge difference. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I think the further I've gotten away from it, because 'cause I'm 4.5 years
Mm.
and you're what?
Six and a
What's the
half.
math?
Yeah,
Help
six
me
and a
with
half.
math.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think that, 1, I hope it gives people hope because it's like, "Oh, I don't really have to think about all that basic stuff anymore." But 2, like, in a way, I kinda miss it because it was such a time of, like, growth and learning and discovery and
Mm.
I guess, like, the struggle, like, just the learning curve, like, that first year is kind of a wild ride, right?
I know, yes. Yes.
So,
Mhm.
you guys have this book, How I Quit Alcohol, and
Mhm.
that might have been, like, a revisiting of your first year, right? Can you talk a little bit about your book and how that
Uh
came about and
Yeah, it was a revisiting, it was really eye-opening, and we'd been writing that book for some time. I remember, gosh, I think it was even before I had started the podcast. I was walking on the beach, that's when I usually get all my little drops of inspiration. And I was almost running back to Ash because he'd written a book before, and I was running back to him going, "We've got to write a book. We've got to write a book about how we quit alcohol, especially you, Ash, because you've got this, a big audience, and I think it would be great for people, especially in the music industry, like to hear that there's this person that, and that you were so in the grips of it. And so I was really inspired back then. So we started writing a little bit then. And he was like, "Oh, I don't know if I want to." And I was just like, "Come on, come on." That's actually how the podcast got started too, because I was like, well, if you're not going to tell the story, I'm going to. And that's how it started. But it started from this inspiration about, I think it would really help people to hear this, and so over like a couple of years, we just write down little bits and pieces and really got into writing and talking about the tools that we used early on, things like gratitude, things like having our musts. Like it really was everything that we used, everything that's in that playbook that we've got was all those things that we used that were helpful to us at the time. Lots of changing mindset stuff. And so, yeah, then the book, of course, then we get an editor in, and the editor's like, "You've got to tell a bit more of your story." So we talk about things that happened. Ash tells some wild stories about like being on tour, playing in front of thousands of people, supporting the Cat Empire or some huge bands like that. and just getting completely shit-faced, or fights outside of a brothel with someone that had broken into our van. He was way all these pretty crazy stories, but so it's sort of it's a meeting of it's kind of like part memoir, part self-help book, I guess. And just it's a real just a really honest account of what we did, what it was like for us, much like the podcast, like what we did, what it was like, and how we got out of it. And so, yeah, the book is out mid-September. It's available for pre-order now. And we're self-publishing the book as well. We decided to self-publish it rather than go with a publisher. And just because we just sort of wanted that control over it, and we wanted it how we wanted it. And also, we've both got fairly big platforms, so we didn't want to kind of give all that away to someone else, also to a publisher. So that was a big decision to make. Yeah, so it's going to be out there, but probably, yeah. So we'll be selling it through our website and on Amazon and things like that. And I don't really know yet. We're just kind of going with it. It's not we're not pouring our heart and soul into it either. It's just like it's done, the book's done, it feels really honest and authentic, and it will be out there for people if they want it. If hopefully it will give them some inspiration and help them on their journey. I mean, that's why we're here, right? Like, that's why we do the podcast or you write books. You wanna help someone and really hope that it does help someone, or whoever, a few hundred people perhaps, I don't know. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's gonna help, and I like that it's a rock and roll story that's not your typical rock and roll story. You guys have been married for how long have you been married?
We've been together for 20 something years, long time.
Aw.
We've probably been married for about 12. Oh, no, no, sorry, my daughter she was 2 at our wedding. Our daughter was 2, so and she's 16 now, so 14 years we've been married. Yeah,
Yeah. But I think
crazy.
also the other part, and something I'm passionate about too, is just showing people that there are other ways of quitting drinking, that you don't, for so long it was either go to inpatient rehab or AA, and that doesn't resonate with a lot of people. So having all these different stories, these different ways that we can change our drinking, become alcohol free is so
Mm.
important, I think.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Look, on my podcast too, I'll have people that have been doing AA or are doing AA, or people have
Yeah,
been to
yeah.
rehab, or people have done my course or someone else's course, because it's different, and it doesn't really matter how you get there, just as long as you get there in a way that works for you. That's why I really like to also get all sorts of people on and not just talk about like my course, for example, because it might not work for someone. It might not be their cup of tea. Same as AA might not be someone's cup of tea. But it's just important to hear lots of different stories, and what eventually someone will go, "Actually, that sounded really good. I might give that a go. I'll see if that works," and it might or might not. But it's just I don't know, I think this whole thing, like, alcohol I'll be honest, Deb, I reckon that alcohol is a very small component of what's probably going on for people a bit deeper, that's a bit below the surface. And it took me a long time to realize that there was lots of stuff through compassionate inquiry and those other things. There was a lot more going on for me under the surface. And so just sort of getting to the bottom of those things is yeah, really nice. Really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. I agree. I agree. Well, tell people how they can find you and find your book.
Okay, well, the best way to reach out to me is probably Instagram. I'd be most active on that, I would say, and that's at How I Quit Alcohol. Yep, that's it. And the website is iquitalcohol.com.au. And so there's lots of, yeah, different ways in which someone could work with me. They might come on a retreat. I run a lot of retreats in Bali. I've got my course, got the book, you can order the book there. Yeah, there's plenty of resources in there, and lots of on my podcast, just lots of different resources and things. And I'd love to get you on the podcast too, Deb, and share your story and what you're doing. That would be
Well,
great.
I would love to. I would be
Mhm.
honored to. And my brother would be happy that I was gonna be on that
Yeah, that's
podcast too.
so great. Awesome.
Yeah, so thank you for
Mhm.
that. I will definitely take
Mhm.
you up on that. Yeah.
Amazing. That would be so great. Yeah. Yeah. So if anyone wants to reach out, I guess they can through any of those channels, I guess perhaps is a good way of doing it. Yeah. But I also just think too, like quitting alcohol too, like giving yourself that space to have some clarity. And that's what that 1 year really gave me. And It's not about like poo-hoo, don't drink alcohol or alcohol's bad for you or anything like that. It's like do something that gives you space and clarity and that's a really loving choice for yourself, especially if you've been someone that's been giving yourself a hard time for years. Just, whether it's that you take one day off. For some people, that's huge, to take one day off.
Mhm.
And then maybe you might take the next day off. And then you might take another day off. And then you might go back. And then you might take another day off. It's just doing what's right for you at the time and just being super, super compassionate with yourself. You're not going to get it right all the time. And none of us get it right all the time, whether it's drinking or this whole, meditation or, just trying to be a good person. Sometimes I'm a real bitch. I try not to be, but sometimes I am. Sometimes I really fuck up. I fuck things up. Sometimes I yell at my kids, I'm not perfect, but I'm trying to be, but I try and meet myself with compassion all the time and just keep working on myself. Try and work on calming my nervous system. I have to work really hard at that, Deb, every day, like, because I'm quite a high strung person. So meditation is really important for me. And definitely taking out alcohol was huge. It made such a big difference on my anxiety. I was having a lot of panic attacks. It made a huge difference on my mood. And I would still have moods. I didn't really have any anxiety attacks. That was interesting after I quit alcohol. But then, it was a slow progression of this kind of continued evolution. And I hope I do continue to evolve as you do too, I'm sure. It's just like that daily inventory, checking in with ourselves and how am I doing right now? How am I doing right now? What do I need right now in this moment to show up as a good person, to show up as the best that I can, and just being super kind to yourself. I just think that's really important. Whether you stumble or fall, we all do. Like I tried so many times to quit alcohol before it stuck for me. And I don't know why it was that it stuck that time, but it did. And I'm super grateful. I'll never go back to drinking because mainly because I've learnt I don't feel that's a loving choice for myself, you know? But life is so much better without it. Like we don't have big fights really anymore. We do fight occasionally, but not these big alcohol fueled flights and fights. I make so much better decisions for myself. And life is just infinitely better because I'm more connected to myself rather than drinking, I don't know, drinking on things that, yeah, just like if I'd be ruminating or hating on myself or I just get to be connected with myself. And I feel like that's awesome, but you do your best. Everyone out there, we're all just doing our best, right? And I
We
think that
really
that's really
are. We
important, so important to know that we're
Yeah,
just doing our best. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. What a
No
lovely
one's perfect.
message.
Mm. I think it's just really important. And it's really important, as you probably know too, that being in this space, it's really important to also let people know that we're not perfect, that we mess up sometimes. And, occasionally there is an alcohol craving that happens that shows up. And I was, 6.5 years in, I don't have them very often, but they do happen from time to time. And I'm really open and honest about that and how I handle with that because that's how people learn and people feel safe also. So yeah, anyway, I hope I'm not waffling on too much, but I really feel like that's an important I just want to really stress that we're not perfect and we do our best and just keep trying. Just keep getting your eye on the prize of where you want to be and keep working towards that and doing things that are going to help you get there. And if that's taking out alcohol, take out alcohol. If that's meditating, start meditating. If that's going for a walk with your mates, do that. But just do something that's going to help you get on that path of where you want to be. I think, yeah, making that the focus more so than getting rid of alcohol. It's about the
Mm,
person you want to become.
yeah, I
Right, that's all I
agree.
wanted to say. It took me a long time to get there, but I got there.
I'm so glad that you did. It's just a message that cannot be shared enough, just letting people know that they're worth it. And
Yeah.
I remind people who are kinda caught up and maybe getting stuck on the drinking and not quite getting to where they wanna be, like, what you put in your body doesn't make you a good or bad person. Like, you are a
Right.
worthy person no
Yes.
matter what. Like, because you
Absolutely. Yeah.
exist, because you were born, because you are here, you are
Yeah.
worthy and you are enough. And I just think it's I'm glad that you brought it up and you're so passionate about it because it's just somewhere along the way we lost that. Like babies don't have to prove
Mm.
their worth. My dog doesn't have to prove his worth. That beautiful tree outside doesn't have to prove its
Yeah.
worth, but somewhere
Mhm.
along our human journey experience, we've gotten to where we have to have all these labels, all these certifications, all these justifications just for being on this planet Earth. And
Mhm.
I love the reminder, like you are enough just by being here, by being you. That is enough.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Oh, I just feel like if everyone could get a taste of that and start to bring that into their life, just reminding themselves, "It's okay. I'm okay. It's okay.
Mhm.
It's okay to stuff up. It's okay if you were a bitch." Hopefully you can repair that and go with back honestly, and, I think part of doing this work is gives you that space to be able to be vulnerable and honest and go back and say, "Hey, I stuffed up there. I'm really sorry about that. Yeah, that wasn't a kind thing I did," or whatever, but just to keep showing up, and checking in. Yeah, how am I doing right now? What do I need? That's just so important. I think that's so important on this journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad we're on this journey together and that we finally got to
Yay!
meet. And thank you
Yay!
so much again. We will
Thank
definitely be
you.
in touch, and I'd love to come on your show, and
Please, that
we'll
would be
keep spreading the
amazing.
word.
Keep spreading the word that you're enough and you just do your best, and yeah. Yeah, and don't compare. That's the other thing I wanna say too, do not need to compare yourself to anyone else. you know, for people listening, if you're worried because someone else, is doing that they think that looks better than you, whatever, don't compare yourself. Just keep doing what you do and just know that you are enough. I'm enough. Make that
Mhm.
your meditation every day. Breathe it in. I am enough. I am enough.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Go have a wonderful day in
Thanks,
Australia.
Deb.
Well, it's
You.
nighttime for me here. You're in the
Yeah.
future. I love that. And people definitely check out How I Quit Alcohol, the podcast, the Instagram, all your retreats. Those look amazing. I was just looking at your website like, oh, I want to go to Bali. I want to go here. And
Yeah,
then check
come
out the book. I
along.
think that will be a fun, entertaining and helpful, inspirational book. So, How I Quit Alcohol. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Alcohol Tipping Point podcast. Please share and review the show so you can help other people too. I want you to know I'm always here for you, so please reach out and talk to me on Instagram at Alcohol Tipping Point and check out my website, alcoholtippingpoint.com, for free resources and help. No matter where you are on your drinking journey, I want to encourage you to just keep practicing, keep going. I promise you are not alone and you are worth it. Every day you practice not drinking is a day you can learn from. I hope you can use these tips we talked about for the rest of your week, and until then, talk to you next time.